Good morning. I'm Ruth Hackney, and welcome to our Real Estate Economic Outlook with Lawrence Yun and WRA Updates with Mike Theo, the CEO of the WRA. I'd also like to introduce Jean Armendariz-Kerr. She is our 2022 president and a broker with Mode Realty Network. Thank you so much for your time, not just today, but this year, Jean. We very much appreciate you. We're going to be kicking off today with Dr. Yun. And then we'll have the opportunity for you to ask him questions through the chat feature or Q&A. Jean is going to be monitoring those and moderating those questions. So please don't hesitate to ask for clarifications or additional information if needed. I did want to say a big thank you to our Professional Development Committee for arranging this session. Keep an eye on our website, rascow.org, rascw.org. The calendar feature there is going to have a multiple in-person and virtual events throughout 2022. And we really want to make sure that you guys are aware of those. So don't hesitate to check those out and sign up. I will introduce Mr. Theo when we come to his session after the first bit by the National Association, but I'll start out with Dr. Yun. Dr. Yun is the chief economist and oversees the research group at the National Association of REALTORS. He supervises and is responsible for a wide range of research activity for the association, including NAR's existing home sales statistics, the affordability index, home buyers and sellers profile report, and he regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends for our over I think it's bigger than this now, maybe 1.6, 1.7 million realtors. He also creates NAR's forecasts and participates in many economic forecasting panels, among them Blue Chip Council, the Wall Street Journal. He appears regularly on financial news outlets and is a frequent speaker at the real estate conferences throughout the United States. And of course, in that role as our chief economist, he also testifies before Congress. Dr. Yun has received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from the University of Maryland at College Park. So big resume. We are more than excited to have him here again this year. Dr. Yun, would you like to take it away?
Great. Hello, Wisconsin. Thank you, Ruth, for the introduction. Thank you, President Jean, for inviting me to share some of my thoughts with the South Central Wisconsin members. It's been quite a spectacular 2-year run in residential real estate. COVID, this ugly virus, which flipped our life upside down. But one silver lining is that real estate really took off, partly due to the low interest rate environment, but partly due to the fact that, people could now work from home, those lucky office workers who have that flexibility. And they are saying, look, I don't have to live so close to downtown. I don't even have to live close to Milwaukee downtown. I could even go out to other counties 1 or 2 hours away. You may even see some Chicago residents coming into your area, given this work from home flexibility. So this has completely changed the real estate dynamics. But what can we anticipate this year in 2022? Let me share with the PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to put that onto the screen. So hold 1 second. Okay, I think you can see it on the screen. So if something is amiss, just let me know, but I will proceed as if you can see it on the screen. So let's first start with the job market, the key job market data. Because in the first month of the lockdown, as we know, it was scary times. How deadly is the virus? What's going to happen to my business? Are we going to face another Great Depression? Well, unemployment rate shot up to 15%. There was some concern that it may even go up to 25%. In fact, in Orlando, Florida, as you know, the tourism-dependent area, Orlando, Florida, their unemployment rate actually shot up to 30% in April 2020. So a lot of uncertainty at that time. But with each passing month, reopening of the economy, jobs have been created, and unemployment rate, the latest, is 3.9%, essentially back to normal. In fact, it is actually slightly lower than even March 2020. So, it's almost matching with February numbers. So in one sense, you can say the job market appears to be back to normal. Then you scratch your head and say, if I look out the window, if I walk the street, I know things are not normal. So certainly this data is not fully reflecting everything that is happening to the economy. Let's look at the economy a little differently. Let's look at how many people have jobs. So payroll employment. So payroll will be based on asking companies and organizations, whether it is hospitals, how many employees do you have? Asking the companies, how many employees do you have? Asking the government. So based on that, this is the number of people with job. April 2020, the low point, but again, job creation. But this is showing that we are not back to normal. We are still shy by 3 million jobs. So we have more room to grow just to get us back to normal. So this is implying we're not back to normal in this data. They say some people have took early retirement, given that home prices are high, or at least through last year, stock market all-time high. So some people who may have been only say 2 or 3 years from retirement decide to say, look, I'm going to retire early because I don't want to deal with all this COVID outside world. I'm going to just simply retire. So that may have had impact as to why unemployment rate is low, but the job market, at least the payroll numbers, are not back to normal. Here's an interesting graph showing the variation across the country. Wisconsin, minus 2.9. What does that mean? Minus 2.9%, essentially 3% fewer people with jobs in the latest state level data, which is as of November 2021. There's some lag in collecting the data. 3% below the job figure compared to pre-COVID. So 3% down. But if you look at nearby states, Minnesota is down a little more, Illinois down 3.5%, Michigan down 3.9%. But also, if you look at the southern states, they're down only minimally, but down only about 1% or so. And then you have the 4 states, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, and Texas, only states with more jobs today compared to pre-COVID days. So some variation. New York is one of the worst performers. And also Hawaii, the Hawaii job market is down 11.9%, but I'm sure you have heard that real estate is booming in Hawaii. Maybe the wealthy people are saying, look, work from home. I'm going to work from Hawaii. I want to have a real estate in Hawaii. But the tourism industry is not there. So local workers are suffering, even though the real estate market is booming in Hawaii. Let me also put attention to Alaska, Louisiana, North Dakota, and Wyoming, 4 states that produce a lot of oil. Right now, as you know, you are feeling the pain at the gas pump, high gasoline prices. Generally, when the oil prices are high, there's more drilling occurring in order to bring more supply and bring the prices down. But the drilling is very minimal, even though oil prices are high. Essentially, the oil companies are saying, well, we are very concerned about what may happen from Washington policymakers. They're highly anti-carbon. They're focusing on somehow the oil companies are bad people. So they're very cautious, which means that given that they're not drilling, they're not hiring people in North Dakota, you may actually have higher gasoline prices for a while. So it's not a fluke on these gasoline prices. It may stay elevated for quite some time unless somehow we have more oil. Of course, we care about the climate change. We want green energy. I am in Washington, D.C. This is NAR building. This is the first green building in Washington, D.C. when this was built more than a decade ago. So green energy is very important. But we also have to concern about how do we transition from current energy to future green energy Do we essentially say oil is bad and hence have high oil prices, or do we make some smoother transition? Irrespective of your perspective, what I can say is with lack of drilling, expect higher gasoline prices to be around for quite some time. Now, interesting data on the job openings, which is the blue line, versus the red, which is the number of people who are searching for a job. So again, going to the early part of the graph, April 2020, that scary time. Look how many people did not have a job versus job openings. But look what's happening lately. If you are unemployed, there's plenty of job openings. I mean, you walk the street and you see help wanted sign everywhere. In fact, if you go out to a restaurant, the service may take a little time because they don't have enough workers. It's possible that one unemployed person could actually find 2 jobs. We are in an almost 2-to-1 ratio in terms of job opening versus people who are searching for a job. It's not only in those low-wage industry of, say, working at 7-Eleven or restaurants, but construction industry needs job, computer programmers, accountants. So there is a job shortage everywhere, and very interesting dynamic currently, almost 2-to-1 ratio in terms of help wanted sign versus people who are unemployed. Now, this is an interesting graph. I mentioned about the payroll data, asking companies how many employees you have, and based on that to see how the job market is changing. So the blue is payroll survey, asking companies, while the orange line is not a survey of companies, it's a survey of ordinary Americans. It's asking simply, do you have a job? And trying to get some information. So blue and orange should usually line up. For example, in July, there were about 1 million job creation in July, according to company survey, as well as when you ask people, do you have a job? 1 million job creation. But look what's happening in the recent 2 months. Companies are saying we hire small number of people. While if you ask people, you are saying, no, I have a job. So the discrepancy between these 2 graphs could be that more Americans are saying, I don't want a boss. I'm going to quit the company and I'm going to be a self-starter and start my own business. Maybe they're in the software engineering and they want us to be some contractors to some companies, or maybe they want to be Uber drivers, or maybe they want to open up a restaurant. People want to say, I want to be my own entrepreneur. And one area where people are saying, I want to be one entrepreneur is becoming a realtor. Record high numbers. Currently, we are surpassed 1.5 million members and still rising. Now, this is good, bad, I'm not sure what to say, but this is what it is. If you are a realtor, it also means it is a competitive marketplace out there. How do you get that listing? How do you find that client, especially for the new members? How do you get that first client? It is fiercely competitive marketplace out there with so many business models, but you still have to admire entrepreneurial spirit to say, even though the business may be tough, competitive, I want to give it a try, because we know that 20% of the realtors do very well. They make 6-figure commission income. And maybe the realtors who are coming in, fresh realtors saying, look, in 2 or 3 years, I will be one of those top 20% and I will succeed. Again, we wish the best luck, but the reality is it is fiercely competitive marketplace. So in this current American labor market, they call it the great resignation. People are quitting companies and then becoming their own self-starting entrepreneur. And one area people are going into is into real estate. Now, the job market in Madison over the past 20 years looks like the following. So from year 2000 all the way to the latest. So steady increase over time. Steady increase over time. And then you see the plunge from the lockdown and then trying to come out of the plunge. You are not back to the prior peak level. So you still have some room to go in terms of getting back up to the prior peak. But I can say that jobs today in Madison area, this is MSA covering several counties nearby, is much higher than what it was in the year 2000, about 60,000 more jobs compared to year 2000. I mentioned this compared to year 2000 because let me illustrate another market, Chicago. Chicago has jobs that is about 10 times larger than Madison MSA. But look what has happened over the past 10 years, a little up, a little down, but today's job is essentially same as in the year 2000. So Madison, let me just go back. You are substantially higher in terms of jobs compared to year 2000, but in Chicago, they're only matching up today. And of course, you see that Chicago still has a long way to go to recover those job losses from the lockdown. Something that everyone is talking about, consumer prices. Well, gasoline prices, as I mentioned, is contributing to larger increase, but not only that, the grocery stores are expensive, and things start becoming more expensive. Maybe clothes is a little cheaper, or some electronic products are a little cheaper, but overall, consumer prices, the basket of goods that Americans would typically buy, rising at 7.1% from 1 year ago. This is the highest in 40 years. If you are age under 40, you have never seen this. If you talk to your parents, grandparents, or you may have lived through the 1970s, you remember the 1970s. Next day, grocery prices higher. Again, and constantly prices rising. So we are essentially going to that condition, very high inflationary condition. So given high inflation, is there a way to hedge against inflation? Traditionally, people would have hedged against inflation by having gold or possibly silver. So say, I'm going to have gold or silver to hedge against inflation. In this new economy with computer, internet, people are saying cryptocurrency could be a good hedge. And there are four groups of people who view cryptocurrency in a different way. First group do not understand what it is. They don't trust it, and they think it's total fraud. I remember Warren Buffett would not invest. I still think that Warren Buffett is not investing in cryptocurrency. So one group says, stay away. Then there's the second group who say, oh, cryptocurrency moves up and down a lot. This is better than betting on Wisconsin Badgers game or any other sports teams. And so people who are just bored, they want to gamble, people get into cryptocurrency. And then there are the midterm investors who say, look, Goldman Sachs is buying cryptocurrency. Morgan Stanley is buying cryptocurrency. Elon Musk, the wealthiest individual in the whole world, is buying cryptocurrency. Surely I should have some exposure to cryptocurrency. So you just follow the crowd and say, look, some institutional money, there's some validation of it. And then there are the long-term investors, essentially people who say, who in the world created cryptocurrency? Why would they create Bitcoin and all this other stuff? What's the reasoning behind it? And essentially they're saying they don't trust the government. Printing money, printing money, printing money. Furthermore, the intrusion, they're trying to track you down. Every time you make $600 transaction, they want to know why you are making that transaction. So get that anonymity, not have the government exposure, people are doing through cryptocurrency. Chinese government hates cryptocurrency because they want to track their citizens. But apparently cryptocurrency is very popular in China because there's no way to know who is doing what. So we don't know how all this will play out. In fact, I'm not advising for or against anything about cryptocurrency. It's your decision. But I just wanted to bring this up to say there's a better hedge against inflation than cryptocurrency that has historically proven to be a very good, and that is real estate. Real estate, decade after decade, always match up with inflationary conditions. Look at 1970. Average annual consumer prices increased 7.1%. Home prices did better than consumer prices. 1980s, for a brief period in the 1980s, mortgage rate shot up to 18%. What happened to the home sales? Home sales crashed. Home sales, your business activity would have been down by 50% for several consecutive years. So real estate really suffered in terms of transaction. But what about real estate prices? No, prices keep going up, even though transactions were not happening because the rents were rising. Anytime consumer prices rise, rents are rising, and the rents provide support for home prices. You look at other decade, very similar. So if you are looking for inflation hedge, you can say, well, gold, possibly. It's been holding steady, not really increasing. Cryptocurrency, I really don't understand it, but one proven area is real estate. So it's something that you may want to share with your clients. Now, on the commercial real estate, you may also want to look at where the rents are rising, because again, rents are the hedge against inflation. And multifamily apartment. So anything that is related to renters, is going to be a good hedge. If you own apartment buildings, the prices will probably rise along with inflation. If you own single family rentals, possibly that will also occur. Second, office. Rents are not rising, which means that office building may not see increase in prices because rents are not rising. Work from home, buildings are empty. I am in Washington, D.C. today. The traffic, non-existent. I just came in 15 minutes. Normally, you will be about an hour with a traffic jam. So the people are not coming to the downtown areas. Similar stories in places like Chicago, New York City. Industrials, rents are rising. Retail, rents are finally beginning to recover. I would say recover, not really a boom. So you can look at different commercial property rent as to see whether there could be a hedge. Now, this is due to the occupancy. So positive, offices, the multifamily, the blue is saying positive net absorption, offices seeing essentially negative and different part. This PowerPoint slide will be available for you to peruse at your own leisure at a later point. But this is also very interesting about office. Again, office is the only sector where the rents are not rising. Look at what's happening in New York City. Massive number of empty buildings. So the net absorption turning negative. Washington, D.C. very negative. Chicago negative. San Francisco negative. So essentially, expensive markets are showing negative, while more affordable markets, or where the jobs are strongly rising on the right column, Austin, Miami, Palm Beach, Houston, they're seeing demand for office spaces. So office demands are rising in the right column. So a little variation as to what's happening. I'm not sure if Madison is in this part or not, but we ranked the top negative, top positive conditions. Let me now go into the home sales market. So related to home sales market, this is showing pre-COVID and post-COVID. So middle is the lockdown. You can clearly see post-COVID home sales are much better compared to pre-COVID. And I think in your areas, year-to-date sales are down about 1% from last year, but last year was the best in 15 years. So essentially, matching 2 straight years of the best performance in 15 years. But the prices in your area is rising about 11%. Now, the new home sales in the meantime has been steadily making gains after the deep plunge in 2010 during the foreclosure crisis. But with the foreclosure crisis out of the way in 2010, steady gains, except for recent months. This is not due to the fact that somehow the buyers do not want to buy new homes. It's just that the doorknob and the window frame are stuck someplace in a container ship out in the ocean. Supply chain disruption. So because of that, some of the new home sales are down, even though the demand and the profit are very high for new home sales. Let me, for the sake of time, just go into the local market. So the orange line is Madison, Wisconsin median home price, the greater Madison area. And the blue line is Chicago. Note that in Chicago, they had a foreclosure crisis in the middle of the chart. So they lost the home prices, came down during the foreclosure crisis, then started to recover. One thing to note is that Madison area had lower prices compared to Chicago in year 2000, but now it is higher, and this gap could open up based on the better performing job market in your local area. Mortgage rate will surely rise. I think today you are already seeing 2-year high in mortgage rates, and it's going to rise further. Maybe there will be some weeks where it declines, but general trend will be up. My best guess, end of the year, 3.7%. My best guess. I mean, it may be 3.5 or it may be 4%, but it's on the upward path because Federal Reserve will be raising interest rates. As to the inventory, as we know, we are very low on inventory, but I think we will slowly turn the corner in 2022. Not abruptly or suddenly, but slowly, we're going to turn the corner. And here's why. Builders are building more. Again, they need those container ships to unload so they can get the jobs done. But that will steadily improve. Supply chain disruption will again go away steadily so the builders can build more. The second reason is that people who have not been paying mortgages because they lost a job. The black line, the top line is mortgage delinquency. Mortgage delinquency has been very high during the COVID period, while the foreclosure has been exceptionally low because even if you didn't pay mortgage, you could still stay in home, mortgage forbearance program. But that program is winding down. So now you have to make mortgage payment or you have to sell your home. So given that condition, I think some people who cannot find the right job, again, there are plenty for job, but maybe the job match is a little difficult. People who cannot find that job, they would have to sell their home given that mortgage forbearance period is ending. Therefore, supply of homes will come onto the market. There are plenty of buyers. There are plenty of buyers who want to purchase. The other reason is this terrible tragedy toll that this COVID has inflicted in America. Number of death certificates in America. So typical year, about 2.5 million people die for a variety of reasons, old age, heart attack, automobile accidents, a variety of factors. Then it was rising even before COVID because America was aging. Baby boomers are reaching a higher age, but also that opioid epidemic has also contributed to the rise. But look how sharply it increased during COVID. So death certificate is rising. We know that the impact is more severe among the elderly, which means that some people have become widow, or in some cases, now there's no one living in the home and it will require an estate sale. I'm just explaining the reality of this terrible tragedy that COVID has inflicted in America. People need help in their housing adjustment. People who suddenly became a widow, maybe they want to downsize. And hence, there is this changes in housing supply need. People would need to list their home either to downsize or in some terrible cases where it will be an estate sale, those inventories will be showing up. Again, I'm not trying to imply trying to be callous of this situation. This is terrible tragedy, but people need help in their adjustment. In the process, more inventory will be showing up. And let me just end it with this forecast. So the forecast regarding home sales is that year by year, this is a national data. Generally speaking, your area has done a little better than national just because you had a better job market performance. But in 2021, towards the bottom, home sales, once we wrapped up all the data, looks like it's going to be up 7%. You are about neutral because maybe higher home prices is hurting affordability. I know in Chicago area, home sales are up about 10% because of better affordability condition. So affordability actually helps on the home sales or the migration. Florida is doing well, Texas is doing well. Home prices nationwide is up about 14%. So dollar revenue in 2021 will be up 21%. Now, of course, there's more realtors, so they are fighting over this economic pie. It's a very competitive market. But in 2022, I see home sales actually coming down about 2% nationwide because of higher mortgage rate squeezing away some of the first-time buyers. So challenge for the first-time buyer, sales coming down. But the housing shortage, to some degree, will still be with us. I know that we are going to get more inventory, but insufficient to balance the market. So prices will continue to increase and the dollar revenue will still be positive in 2022. So thank you very much for giving me this time to share some of my thoughts with you. And now I am going to turn it back to either President Jean or Ruth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yun. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us this morning. I'm going to open it up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions? Right now, we don't have any in our question and answer panel. No? Well, then perhaps we'll move on to Mike then. Thank you so much, Dr. Yun.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is Mike Theo. Mike just celebrated his 37th anniversary with the Wisconsin REALTORS Association. Hard to believe you're even that old, Mike. The last 11, he has been the CEO. And for the 26 before that, he was the head of legal and public affairs. He was supposed to be presenting this morning with Corey Lamont, but she was called to the Capitol advocating for housing and advocating for our members. So proud to introduce Mike Theo to talk about the WRA and what's happening in Wisconsin.
Well, great, and good morning, everyone. I was just going to say that anytime you can start the morning out with Lawrence Yun and get a national and local perspective on the marketplace is a good day, but I think I'll substitute Ruth's kind comment about my age as a good way to start the day as well. So thank you all. Thank you, President Jean, for having us here. And I will address Corey's absence here in a bit, but I wanted to take a few minutes just to discuss a couple of the threats that we see in 2022 as an overview for the year that's coming our way. But it's important to put this in context and step back over the last couple of years as our industry was determined here in the state of Wisconsin to be an essential service at the very beginning of the pandemic. And as we received that designation from the governor, we were able to, with certain precautions, continue practicing. Some of our neighboring states that did not initially have that designation saw their markets shut down. And we made some promises to the governor about how we would amend our practices to be safe. He took us at faith at our word, and has since we've held our promise, and so has he. So we were able to stay in business, and as a result, unlike a lot of other industries, we were able to start to not just survive, but to thrive in the second half of 2020 and into 2021. As you may have seen, we released our statewide data, some year-end data yesterday, as well as December numbers. And the lack of inventory and supply, as you heard Lawrence say, is still driving our marketplace. Our sales were just slightly up, just enough to set a record for Wisconsin in sales in 2021. But our listings were down almost 13%. Our prices were up over 10%. This is from December of 2020. Our months of inventory was down 13%. And the interest rates, as you heard Lawrence talk about, were up about 16.5%. They were at almost 2.7 in 2020. And in December, they were at 3.1 on a 30-year fixed. So that was the marketplace and how we got here. But that supply issue is really one of the threats that we continue to face moving into 2021 or 2022. But the WRA is taking some aggressive actions on the legislative front to try to address these issues. As we see not just prices going up and rents going up as a result of the shortages, but also employers who are desperately looking for employees for any kind of decent expansions in their markets need housing, and that housing supply shortages is really affecting employers across the state. So the ripple effect throughout Wisconsin's economy is exaggerated in that sense. You might recall that we partnered with the UW-Madison Urban and Regional Planning Department and Dr. Kurt Paulson last year produced a report called Falling Behind, which took a deep dive and a look at to why Wisconsin's housing shortages exist both from the impact of national trends, but also what we're doing here in the state of Wisconsin. And as a result of that study, which we widely distributed, particularly to policymakers in the legislature and throughout state government, was a slew of issues, a whole package of supply-related issues in housing, 8 bills in total that were looking at different parts of the causes of our workforce housing shortages that were identified in Dr. Paulson's report last year. I'll just mention a few of these. One bill tries to ensure that there are shovel-ready lots available, lots for development at the local level. Another one incentivizes WHEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, to increase their rehabilitation loans to try to rehab existing housing and put more stock on the marketplace as a result. Another piece of legislation strongly encourages communities over 50,000 in population to use their federal ARPA funds, the pandemic-related funds, to put into prioritizing housing and housing supply and development at the local level. One other bill creates a sales tax exemption for construction-related materials to try to lower the cost for developers and builders to put more inventory into the marketplace. One of the more important ones is a regulatory reform bill, which really looks at local land use policies on the books and tries to recommend changes that would make it easier and cheaper for builders and developers to put new product in the market. It would increase things like density levels. It would streamline the approval process for permits. It would cut bureaucratic red tape and duplicative services and requirements that often slow down the development process. And it would expedite and put timelines on the approval process, which would, this host of regulatory reforms hopefully would really cut the time in bringing products, new development online. Another piece of legislation would have local housing authorities improving their investment of their funds and create new financing chains that aren't there currently. And others would prohibit practices on speculatory property tax assessments and use more hard data when talking about assessments of homes and the taxes that follow. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other pieces of legislation, but we really took to heart where we thought government regulations and changes in laws could help the supply chain, and we put those pieces of legislation before the Wisconsin legislature, and I'll update you a little bit more on the status of that in a minute. So that's the marketplace threats that we look at, dominated by the sales or by the supply shortages in our markets. There's another set of threats, though, we're looking at in 2022 that's worth keeping an eye on, and these are legal threats to the industry that are happening at the national level. Any one of these, should they be successful, would have a dramatic impact on the way we practice real estate, both in Wisconsin and in the United States. The first one you may have heard of is the Department of Justice, which had started an investigation into real estate practices over a year ago. And NAR negotiated an agreement with the Department of Justice, changed some of the practices and that go into our transactions, our transaction model, and the deal was sealed until the new administration came in, a new Department of Justice, which for the very first time withdrew an agreement that they had with a regulated entity and reopened the investigation into real estate practices. Their goal, some of the stated claims, is that they want to make sure that the real estate transaction does not close the marketplace or restrict the marketplace for buyers and sellers, or that they don't lock in higher fees or prevent new models of doing business, as alleged by some real estate brokerages across the country, and somehow that the combination of these are locking in higher prices and not allowing for competition. So that front and that investigation and by the Department of Justice, I think, is something worth keeping an eye on. Similarly, the Biden administration, under an executive order by the president, has pushed the Federal Trade Commission to also look at any anti-competition impacts or rules in the practice and in the transactions as we operate today, to make sure there isn't any unfair tying or exclusionary business practices in the way that we list and sell real estate in the country. And that is an ongoing investigation by the FTC. And then finally, there are several private lawsuits that sue entities like NAR and like Zillow and other major franchise brokerages across the country, challenging how commissions are determined and what the practices are. These are, again, allegations brought by alternative model brokerages. But the law firms that are behind these lawsuits are worth noting that some of these are very large, very experienced in large tobacco lawsuits, for example. These are firms that have superb reputations for winning their cases and having the financial wherewithal to stick with lawsuits through thick and thin and through sometimes laborious and long legal processes. And these lawsuits are ongoing. They want to look at whether or not our practices are either inflating commissions or steering buyers in a certain way. They claim that there's in the $50 billion that are being overcharged in our current marketplace across the country. So the upshot of these legal activities is that we're really under the microscope as far as the practices that we have come to know over the years. And it brings up a lot of interesting perspectives. At the WRA, we are undertaking a strategic view when we're looking at our strategic plan for the next several years and also for our priorities for 2022. And starting with the premise of what happens if some of these or all of these lawsuits were to come to pass. What would happen if our members didn't need to join the Realtor organization, for example, to have access to the MLS? What would be our value proposition in the absence of that linkage between membership and the business practices through the MLS? It gives us an interesting perspective at what programming and what priorities we have for the upcoming year when viewed through those lenses of the threats that we have from a legal perspective. Let me now turn to, Corey gave me a few notes. Like Ruth said, we are in the most active period of time in a 2-year state legislative session period, which means that we're kind of at the beck and call of the legislature. Corey is at the Capitol as we speak, and it's bad news that she's not here, but it's good news that she's down there, which means some of our bills that are now waiting action in the state Senate are starting to have hearings, which is the beginning, near the beginning of the legislative process. We have 13 bills that are remaining on our priority list and only about 60 days to pass them. And that is phenomenal. I think most organizations, both here and across the country, if they have 2 or 3 major legislative priorities in any given session, I think that's more the norm. Here we are with 13 important bills pending in front of the legislature. I mentioned the 8 workforce housing bills. I think it's worth mentioning that we are in a hybrid legislative environment here in the state of Wisconsin, with the legislature, the state assembly, and the state Senate controlled with decent margins and the majority by Republicans. And we have a Democratic governor, which means neither party can run their will without having a block either in the legislature by the Republicans or in the executive branch with the governor being a Democrat. Our 8 housing bills have made it through the state assembly and are now pending in the state Senate. All of those bills in this highly partisan environment and a split government passed the assembly either by a voice vote or by unanimous, a vote of unanimous support, save one. One bill had a partisan vote, and that one we're working to try to find agreement in the Senate. So again, that's a testimony, I think, to our ability to get legislation passed, but also to get it passed in a bipartisan or nonpartisan way, which is, I think, a real testimony to how we lobby and what we lobby. There are other bills. The evaporation of a 40-year easements, which sometimes parties to a transaction don't find out about until closing. A very big surprise, an easement has ended, and we'll have legislation to address that. We're looking at proceeds that counties receive when they foreclose on properties that aren't homestead properties, and keep nearly all of the proceeds, even more than what the foreclosure was necessary for, back taxes. We're looking at discriminatory covenants that are on the books that we're going to try to address moving forward. All of these bills, as I mentioned, are moving through the legislative process with just 60 days to go. A handful of them only having one house to go through. That brings me to my last point, which is, in this incredibly large agenda with an incredibly short period of time to go, the timing of our Realtor in Government Day on February 9th, in just a few weeks, couldn't be more opportune for us to bring in a large contingent of realtors to Madison to help go to the Capitol and make our point on the necessity of these pieces of legislation and why we need their support. And you all are in a unique position because of your proximity to Madison. You're not way up in Rhineland or Ashland, and you have the least amount of time commitment, I think, to travel, and gives you a real opportunity, if we can boost our numbers from Raskow to help put a large contingent of our members, the constituents of those legislators that are voting on our key legislative issues, it's really going to make a difference. So if you haven't already, and you think you could, we strongly encourage you to please take some time and spend an afternoon with us in the Capitol, and to help push these bills over the end. One closing comment: Ruth said that I spent 26 years of my career as the chief lobbyist for the association. I can tell you without hesitation that when we bring in our realtors from across the state, it makes a huge difference for the subsequent weeks when the lobbying team goes and follows up and tries to make the closing arguments for our legislation. So it's always been, in all my years at the WRA, our winning sauce is engaged and active members and a top world-class lobbying team, and the combination of those two things have really made our organization successful. So the time is now. We have a moment in time, and hopefully after 60 days we look back and say, boy, we pulled off a big one for not only ourselves but for property owners in the state of Wisconsin. So with that, thank you very much for having me. Corey sends her best, as do the rest of the team here at the WRA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. And sorry that Corey couldn't be here, and we're very thankful that you were willing to fill in for her. We did have a question that came in. Unfortunately, Dr. Yun has had to leave, and I wonder if perhaps you might be able to speak to it, actually. Those of us who practice in some of the higher cost, more dense, urban centers have noticed a significant number of our clients are looking further and further out into more rural areas. Are there any movements that are being made by the WRA that might impact the rural markets or the availability of housing or high-speed internet in conjunction with our state legislature?
A great question. And yes, high-speed internet, has become a huge determining factor on people's choices on where to live. And with this out-migration of sorts, that was particularly evident in 2020, but also in 2021. We prioritize the WRA, organized one of the largest coalitions of interest groups and interests in the state of Wisconsin to organize behind increasing state support for broadband expansion into the rural areas. And I can't, while I don't have the exact numbers in my hand, it happened at the right time because it was during a state budget that this coalition was pushing for additional state funds at the same time that the federal government was in their ARPA funds to local units of government prioritizing broadband expansion. And so while I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, I do know it was the largest commitment by the state of Wisconsin to recognize the trend that you mentioned, and those efforts will continue. I give you one example is one of our major partners in this was the Hospital Association, and given where they are in their market with the pandemic, et cetera, a lot of televisits they went skyrocketed. Their follow-up to surgery communications were all done virtually rather than having people come into the office because of the threat of the pandemic. And so you see where the interests align, not just in people moving out or doing business or working from home, but also in industries like the hospital industry and healthcare across the board. So a good confluence of interest and resulting in the largest investment in history.
Wonderful. Thank you again for spending this morning with us and for everything that you guys do on our behalf legislatively. And I am signed up to come for Realtor Government Day, so you will see me there. And I hope those of you who are still participating in the call will also register and come and lend your voices.
Great.
Absolutely. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll say thank you to Mike one more time. Big thank you to Dr. Yun for being here this morning as well. And thank you everyone for participating. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.